is a great example for that. I think in a short month, MoneyGram moved from just signing a partnership agreement with us all the way to launching a functional pilot. So that's pretty amazing. With that said, there's a lot of financial innovation happening in our space. AMMs were a good start, and we need to figure out what are the next steps for this type of innovation and how they sit well with Stellar. The other thing is we're living in a multi-chain world. There are a lot of really interesting blockchains, a lot of solutions being built. We want to make sure that Stellar users have access to these other chains. We've always been about interoperability with traditional finance. Now we need to think about cryptocurrency.
So right now we're not yet 22, but what does this mean? Like the way that you've looked at the ecosystem needs with folks here and also outside, what does it mean for 2022?
So I'm going to shamelessly plug my talk tomorrow that's going to talk about that exactly. With that said, some items that we're going to discuss is, first of all, we're introducing something called SpeedX into the Stellar protocol. SpeedX is an innovative DEX approach to doing batch trading. It really changes how trading works. It's work done by Jeff Ramsire, who's actually David's student in Stanford, and he's actually given a tech talk about it, and I highly recommend watching it. It's meridian.stellar.org. So SpeedX is one thing. It's really going to help democratize access to liquidity pools. It's also going to help set us up for the scalability needs of the network. In addition, we are looking at bridges. So I said we need to expand interoperability in cryptocurrency ecosystems. The way to do that is through trust minimized bridges. So we're looking at various solutions, both supporting ongoing ecosystem efforts like Flare and like Pendulum. We're also giving a talk in Meridian. I recommend checking that out. We're launching an internal task force in the SDF to allocate engineering resources to make sure that Stellar is a great network to build bridges on. And I'm also happy to announce that we're starting a new bounty program for developers, and the first bounty is going to be for building bridges. We're going to talk a bit more about that tomorrow. And obviously, we still need to keep Stellar the most robust network out there. Both Stellar Core and Horizon are doing great. We need to make sure that they enable the growth of the network because we're seeing a lot of on-chain activity this past year.
Yeah, no, it's pretty amazing, the amount of what we've seen the growth this year, but also I think that the point about the bounty and the need for engagement outside and working more with the community, I think it's a really cool process for us. All right, Candace, lots of stuff in the policy and regulatory discussions this year. We've seen a lot of it out there. Some of it was met with positive critique from the ecosystem, the blockchain ecosystem as a whole, some of it not so much. What is our approach to this?
So you're right, there's been a lot of activity and a lot more attention from policymakers and regulators. We started the year with Nigeria, the central bank, kind of having a knee-jerk reaction to a negative, what they perceived as a negative use case. I think there's still a lot of focus on these negative use cases from the policy and regulator perspective. So whether it's ransomware, terrorism financing, money laundering, and so those are use cases. They all are risks that have to be addressed, but our approach is to bring forth the positive use cases and the real world solutions that this technology can bring and is already bringing. So we lead with those use cases, which is a great opportunity for us to talk about all of the things that are going on in the ecosystem as it's our partners who are building on Stellar, creating those solutions, and then making sure that folks understand these solutions are happening right now, and with clearer regulations, the sky's the limit. We really could leverage this technology and solve a lot of problems.
So true. I hear so often all of these, the concerns around what the negative uses for blockchain. But I do think it's really interesting when you think about fiat and what happens with fiat and there's no paper trail. But yet with blockchain, it's an immutable record, it's out there. So even in the bad use cases, there's value to regulators and policymakers on that. When you talk about engaging with regulators and policymakers, what does that mean?
Well, we have a multi-tiered approach. So we start with working with industry, starting with just things like our CBDC white paper to make sure that there's good accessible content. No offense, David, but your white paper is sometimes a little hard for some of us. So, and then any opportunity, for example, Senator Toomey called for proposals. And so we took that opportunity to send in a letter giving proposals about how to navigate the regulatory environment. And then good old fashioned meetings. And luckily things are opening up more and we can have more and more in-person meetings, but just getting in and educating and making sure that we are closing that trust and knowledge gap that exists between the industry and governments.
How hard is it to navigate this regulatory framework, or maybe in some cases lack of framework?
Well, it's not easy, but that's why we're all here, because it's a dynamic environment and it's challenging and interesting. And because we're motivated by the change that this technology can bring and the problems we can solve, it's worth the challenge. And but yes, certainly, particularly in the United States, there's so many different agencies right now. There seems to be a little bit of a battle amongst the agencies about who's going to take control and who's going to have jurisdiction, and whether the agencies have enough tools, or if Congress has to give them those tools. But we're there and we're in the conversation as that is happening. So we have to remember that this is still, even though the blockchain, the Stellar Network started in 2014, this is still a very young industry. And I think that it's a very engaged industry with this process in trying to get to the right place. So it's a challenge, but it's great that we're in the conversation and helping to shape the future.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. David, one of the things that we hear all the time discussed is whether or not Stellar is decentralized. This is an interesting question from a technical standpoint, and obviously also from a regulatory standpoint, because there seems to be lots of focus on it from a regulatory standpoint as well. So I know that this topic is near and dear to your heart. What is unique about Stellar from the decentralization standpoint?
Right. So, I guess, like most blockchains, the operation of the network itself is decentralized in the sense that there's no entity that's sort of critical to its functioning. And we had an unfortunate test of this back in April when the Stellar Development Foundation's validators went down, and the network continued to process transactions. Some people thought it was unreachable because they were trying to contact our servers, but the fact is that there were other servers out there, and we showed that the network went on without us. Now, what's different between Stellar and most other blockchains, the Stellar is built from the ground up to be a multi-asset blockchain, and specifically to be a great blockchain on which people trusted and known entities could issue assets. And so that means that where most blockchains use mining to do consensus, we use a different approach, which is my Stellar consensus protocol, which is based on the assumption that different known entities who are issuing assets will want to agree with one another. And so what that means is that sort of your clout in the network in terms of governance can derive from the assets that you're issuing and the value of those assets, not just sort of whether you own a bunch of mining rigs or have a bunch of the native cryptocurrency, which would be the case in a mining system based on proof of work or proof of stake.
So is Stellar decentralized?
Yes, it's decentralized both in the operation of the network, but also in the sort of governance and the issuance of assets. And that, like, if you issue an asset, you can have a say in the network without the need to also have a mining operation.
And you have that say through?
You have that say through the ability to designate the validators that you pay attention to when you're redeeming assets, right? So if I were to issue, for example, a fiat-backed token on Stellar, I would give that token value by saying, hey, I'm willing to redeem this token. And if I say, well, and by the way, when you're sending it back to me to redeem, this is the server that I listen to, then anybody who cares about getting paid in this token is going to also listen to that server. And so as the asset issuer, I have the ability to designate that. Whereas on a mining-based blockchain, I don't have that control, right? I'm just trusting that anonymous miners who are potentially incentivized by mining rewards will do the right thing, will continue to obey the protocol. And ideally, when they do protocol upgrades will also protect my interests because I'm a part of the ecosystem, but that's not under my control. I just kind of have to hope that they'll care about what I care about.
Yeah, so decentralization is obviously really important to us, not just because of the folks that out there that care about it from a regulatory standpoint, but just about that's what makes the network work from the standpoint of having this trustless environment out there that folks can depend on.
And I guess it's not just decentralized, but it's decentralized kind of in the right way, in that the sort of, there's a bunch of people with clout, and the clout can derive from the actual value you're adding to the network, as opposed to some proxy for that, which might be inaccurate, which is like how much you participate in mining, which would be the case in a more traditional blockchain.
Yeah. Karen, you talked about how you're fairly new, almost a year in. You're not new to fintech, but you are definitely new to blockchain. So what has it been like for you to step into this role, especially in the engineering side here at SDF?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is like my background has been working in the world of distributed systems with centralized financial applications and SaaS. So SaaS stands for software as service. And in that world, there's a lot of technical challenges around like real-time, low latency designs that need to support this concept of multi-tenancy. And so there's, security segregation, there's geographic distribution, there's the CAP theorem, which David knows a lot about, like making trade-offs between consistency, availability, and partitioning. And, usually you're trying to optimize for 2 out of the 3. So you can get consistency, but you may be trading off on availability. And certainly we have a point of view here with the Stellar Consensus Protocol. So I think like you take all of that complexity and then you bring it into the world of open source and decentralization. And it's kind of raising the bar in a sense, right? Because not only do you have to design the system to work across like multiple geographies, but you have multiple operators with different levels of skill. They're in different runtime environments. So they could be running virtual machines, they could be running Kubernetes, they could be on bare metal, they have different form factors. And so, being able to make something that's able to deliver on all of these consistency guarantees in such a hybrid world, I think is super fascinating. And it's definitely part of the challenge here in engineering.
Sounds really easy, actually.
Yeah.
So in 2021, SDF was labeled as one of the great places to work. And it's not news to us internally because we know that. But for you, what is it like for you? And what do you see as the value of being here at SDF?
Yeah, I think, the diversity, equity, and inclusion story at SDF starts with the fact that we have a female CEO. And I did some research, with Fortune 500 companies, apparently only 8% of those companies have women leaders, which is abysmal.
Yeah.
And there was some headlines trumpeting the excitement around how, that had been like an increase of 2% since 2019. So it was at 6% in 2019.
Yay.
Yay. And, I think taking in conjunction the fact that we have a female like chief, legal counsel, sorry, as well as a female VP of engineering, the likelihood of that happening in another company is pretty low. So I think like we are a low probability type of configuration. And so we're a unicorn. And that kind of leadership cascades down into the culture and values of SDF. In engineering, we really value things like openness, inclusion, transparency, autonomy, really developing that empathy muscle and caring about our users, right, at the edge of the network and what they're trying to do in the network. And it translates into the way that we actually self-organize at SDF. We just went through this process in the last quarter with Tiger Teams. And the Tiger Teams basically engaged almost every employee at SDF to talk about the different dimensions of strategy that's really important for the next year. So in the quarter, they met, they did research, they debated, they ideated, they baked ideas, and at the end, they all came up with proposals and positions that we are going to take away as a leadership team and build the strategy for the next few years. And so I just think like diversity is really cool at SDF because I can see it in action. And I think it's really represented by everybody actually on this panel. Like we come from such different backgrounds, nonprofit. I come from a commercial background. We've got folks from academia and government.
Yeah. I like thinking about us as a unicorn.
Yeah.
Of different sorts. We're a unicorn. What could we do better?
Well, I prefer to talk about what we're already putting into action, right? So I think we can all do better in tech and being able to actually recruit a diverse workforce. And so at SDF, the way we're approaching that problem is taking a more expansive view of pedigree, right? So we're in Silicon Valley. It's really important in some companies to recruit from the FANGs, and that stands for like the Facebook, Apples, Amazons, Netflix, Googles of the world. And it includes, certain academic backgrounds and degrees. And although I think those are really important signals, it's not the whole picture of a candidate. And so from a recruiting standpoint, I'm kind of more interested in the narrative of, the different roles that someone has had over their career, right? So it's the transitions and why they made those decisions, and what does it say about their curiosity, their initiative, their kind of appetite for risk and entrepreneurship. And so I think that's kind of our work here is like, to be inclusive and expansive and find those other unicorns.
Yeah, and I think it's important for us to think about that from the ecosystem standpoint too, which is one of the Tiger teams this year was focused on how we can be more inclusive and focus on that for growing the ecosystem and bringing other players into it. David, there's a lot of focus around sustainability and sustainability and blockchain in particular. I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts with respect to Stellar and sustainability and just the topic generally?
So I think that there are two kinds of sustainability that you actually want to talk about in the blockchain space. One is just kind of energy and kind of ecological sustainability. What is your carbon footprint? And the other is economic sustainability. So, so Stellar does not do mining, right? Our validators, they just need to compute a few digital signatures for every block. It's essentially a trivial amount of computation. And by contrast, the proof of work blockchains consume an enormous amount of energy. In fact, the security of those blockchains is based on the fact that so much energy is being consumed in order to mine new blocks. So in that sense, of course, we're much more sustainable from an energy point of view. We could quibble that some of the proof of stake blockchains, because they have anonymous miners, need, sort of thousands of validators, whereas we need dozens. But the truth is both of those are kind of in the noise compared to proof of work. So on the second type of sustainability, economic sustainability, you have to look at the fact that in a mining-based blockchain, mining basically assumes a rational attacker model in which the people participating in mining are anonymous, and you have to somehow pay them rewards that are sufficient for them to avoid cheating in the system. And so that means either you need to create some new kind of currency out of thin air, basically like creating new Bitcoin or new ETH, or you need to have sufficient transaction fees that the miners are going to get those transaction fees and be incentivized to do the right thing. And the problem is that because the miners are anonymous, in order to incentivize people not to cheat, the greater the value of the economic activity happening on the blockchain, the greater the value of those mining rewards is going to need to be. And so as you start to grow, either you're going to have to create some new asset that's going to be worth, a good fraction of $1 trillion, but $1 trillion is starting to be a lot of money, so you're going to start diluting all the traditional assets like fiat currency, or you're going to need to impose like fairly hefty transaction fees. And again, because we don't have mining, we just have that problem, right? All of our validators, they're known entities, right? They have cloud in the network because people trust them and have extrinsic reasons to trust them, like they are, also involved in issuing a token people trust and are hoping to redeem, or they are a regulated entity, right? We can leverage these other mechanisms we have to trust the validators without needing to basically pay them to do that.
It's such an important thing for the ecosystem and for its growth, the sustainability on both cases. We actually have to wrap up. I'm super bummed because I had so many things, but I do want to give you guys each just like 10 seconds. What are you excited about in 2022? Tomer.
I'm excited about interoperability with the rest of the cryptocurrency world.
Karen.
Same exact answer. And I've actually been given a challenge by Mark Heyman, who's our VP of BD, to be able to onboard anchors in less than 2 weeks.
David.
I'm excited about CAP 21 and how it's going to enable things like payment channels. And I'd like to plug Lee McCullough's talk on Starlight at meridian.stellar.org on the Tech Talks tab.
Candace.
I'm excited about partnering both internally and externally on new and creative ways to support the growth and development of the ecosystem.
Well, I'm excited about working with all of you. It's rare when you get to work with people you like, respect, feel are amazing contributors to the ecosystem, and that's what we have here. And that's why it's easy to get up every day and to do this job. So thank you for being here. And I'm going to hand it back over to Justin to keep the program going. Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Danelle. Thanks, Candace, Tomer, Karen, David. It was great to see you all together for that discussion, and just a really good energy in that room. It's also incredible to reflect on what we did in 2021, both as an ecosystem, as an organization, and as a community. As noted during the discussion, there's still more work to be done as we strive for continued growth and inclusion. And so coming up after this next break, we'll turn our attention to a session on our work with MoneyGram and how we're bridging digital assets and local currencies. We also have another quiz coming up during the break, so stay with me. All right, everyone, here's the second quiz of the day. To participate, click on the QA and quiz tab on the right-hand side of your screen next to the live chat and submit your answer. The question is, what is the current minimum transaction fee on Stellar? Options are 10 stroops, 100 stroops, 1,000 stroops, 10,000 stroops. Get your answers in now, and I'll be back in a couple of minutes to share the correct one. Okay, everyone, let's pick up where we left off with that last quiz question. What is the current minimum transaction fee on Stellar? The correct answer is 100 stroops. That's 100 stroops per operation. So for anyone unfamiliar, 1 stroop is the smallest unit of XLM, equivalent to 1/10 millionth of lumen. Fun fact, stroops are named after stroopwafels, which is a delicious Dutch snack and SDF staple during the early days of protocol development, the days of yore. That minimum transaction fee is actually set by validators who vote on it, just like they vote to add transaction sets to the ledger. Governance, just like David was talking about. All right, continuing on with the program, I'd like to kick off our next session, Bridging Digital Assets and Local Currencies. You may notice that Danelle is in a different setting for this one. She's in Dallas, Texas, no longer San Francisco. That magic is more of a feat of time travel than, say, teleportation. This conversation was recorded in person at the MoneyGram offices in Dallas earlier this week. So I'm pleased to turn it over to Danelle, Alex Holmes, Chairman and CEO of MoneyGram, and Linghua Wu, VP of Global Communications and Public Affairs for Google, to share an update on the MoneyGram work we announced in early October. Ling, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Linghua Wu, and I'm a proud board member of Stellar Development Foundation. And I'm here today to moderate a panel with Alex Holmes, the CEO and chairman of MoneyGram International. And Alex has been at the helm since 2016, and he's led the digital transformation of the company. Really excited that he's here with us today. And Danelle Dixon, who's the CEO and executive director of SDF. And I get the pleasure of seeing Danelle in action, and she's really truly a phenomenal leader. And she's helped grow the network and really been an advocate for Stellar globally since 2019. So welcome, everyone, and really excited for a conversation today. And I'd love to start out to talk about our exciting new partnership together. And I'm wondering, what have you heard? What have you heard? What feedback have you heard about the partnership? And would you like to start, Danelle?
Sure. I think from the network standpoint and from the folks that are in the ecosystem, the feedback has just been phenomenal, meaning that more and more players want to be involved in it. And they recognize the value that this brings to not just Stellar, but to blockchain generally, where it's transformational. It's an opportunity to really bridge that fiat world with the digital world. And so I think that the feedback that we're hearing is they can't wait for it to get started, and they just really want to be a part of it.
Yeah, no, and I'll just add that it's been really exciting for us in both, the investment community, investor community, along with things going on in the media and kind of promoting MoneyGram. We've been on this digital transformation for a number of years, and to really think about progressive innovation and how do we continue to push that agenda. The partnership here is so exciting for us. We've been kind of, I guess, probably a couple, 3 years, maybe longer, 4 years, maybe, that kind of Danelle and I have been talking about doing something, and so this really brings that to life. And there's a lot of energy, a lot of excitement around it, both internally and externally for MoneyGram. So it's really, really nice to see it coming to life and being able to talk about it. So it's fantastic.
Danelle, what in particular about the partnership excites you the most? What opportunities does it unlock?
I think it's the opportunity to really reach those that don't have bank accounts and those that don't actually have credit cards or wire transfers. Normally, to get into blockchain today, you really need to be able to get your cash and convert it into a digital asset. You need to be able to leverage one of those types of things, either a wire transfer, a credit card, or a bank account. This creates the real opportunity to bring the cash world into blockchain, and to make it so that folks that don't have a bank account can actually leverage their wallet for that purpose. Once they create the digital wallet by bringing the assets onto the network, for example, they can do so much. They can create yield opportunities for themselves. They can send money to their families. They can hold their assets, to hedge against inflation in their local community if they choose to do so. There's just so much opportunity. The developers on the network are the ones that are really creating like this coolness about like what wallets can do, but it's this relationship that brings the opportunity for these individuals who historically couldn't get into the blockchain to be able to get in. So that's the part to me that is unique and transformational and super cool. And also it just bridges this world. And we talk about interoperability all the time. This is actually the true interoperable state that we want to get to.
And anything to add to that, Alex?
Yeah, I think the most exciting and I guess maybe dynamic and interesting part for me is that you really have kind of two worlds evolving at the same time, right? We've had all this excitement over the last decade and a half in sort of the payment space, cross-border, what's going on. And that's in sort of in the traditional financial markets, right? And that is, covered in regulation and change and everything happening with currencies. And then you've sort of had this complete parallel world evolving with blockchain and digital currencies and all the excitement around that. And what I find is fascinating about both is that they really kind of have the same agenda, right? The traditional financial markets, it's all been about speed and transparency and reliability for cross-border payments. Blockchain, digital assets are trying to do the same thing in a very different way. But again, they rely on speed, they rely on transparency, and really the interoperability between the two exists in a degree, but when you start to bridge the two, the speed goes like out the door and it becomes very, very slow, which I find sort of ironic. And to me, I think there's so much dialogue about, will, blockchain and crypto sort of displace the current financial markets, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if that's even the right question. I think for me, it's that I think they're going to run together and they're going to interoperate about with SDF, and thinking about how we can make that come to life is really pretty compelling. And so that's like, I think for me, the most interesting part of it all.
Well, and I think that looking at the idea that what Alex and his team and what MoneyGram International has built over the years, this agent network, it's completely relevant to what's happening because it's the feet on the ground, it's the people in the local regions, it's the folks that are working with the local constituents and bringing them opportunity every day. You can't ignore that that's what blockchain has been missing for years and years. And so now being able to bring those together and to say, like, this agent network is crucial. It's a really important part of being able to get that financial inclusion that we always talk about.
So I'm hearing that interoperability and speed are really important problems to solve for your customers, and having sort of on-the-ground agents is going to bring that to where it needs to be. Other problems or issues that we think that this partnership will really help bridge and solve?
I think it opens up the opportunity for the wallet providers who are already building on Stellar, and those who haven't yet started building on Stellar, we'd love for them to come along as well, to be able to gain this access to this new user base and also really create opportunity for them, right, in terms of what I mentioned before in terms of yield. But I also think that this is a really important example of how we're not trying to supplant the existing financial infrastructure, but truly enhance it, because it's just another thing that you can use. It's another rail that's out there that can be leveraged when appropriate, whether that be from a business or the consumer side.
Yeah, and I'll probably add that I think the compliance aspect is an interesting one as well, right? And we live, historically MoneyGram's lived in the cash world, and there's been a big push from regulators to get it more digitized, right? Because there's a view that cash has a lot of secrets to it, I suppose, is a good way to put it. It's ironic to me, you get into the world of blockchain and you almost have the exact same thing the other direction, which is, oh, well, that's almost, too digital for us. So we want to somehow streamline that. So one of the things that we've really focused on in the relationship has been, how do we create the interoperability, but also how do we also do it compliantly, right? And so what we're actually doing through the process steps, which you'll probably see in the video when we show you kind of how it works, is that we're actually linking wallets to names and IDs and phone numbers. And so we are creating that enhanced compliance that a lot of regulators are looking for. And I think that's also a very proactive aspect of what we're doing. So you're really creating transparency between two worlds where a lot of regulators are questioning, how transparent is this, and can we really, make it relevant in sort of a regulated world? Because I think regulators always sort of trail, right? They're always a little bit behind, they're always looking back and then trying to catch up. And I think what we're doing here is taking what we know is best standards in the regular financial system and applying that to create that interoperability as well. So there's a lot of things coming together here, which is really, really, really interesting.
Yeah, and from the compliance standpoint, there's also, this is an immutable record, right? Every time that a transaction is actually finalized on the blockchain, it's an immutable record. And having chain analysis, where a company can come in and analyze the chain, it's actually something that's really interesting from a regulatory standpoint, and it's valuable to make sure everything's compliant as well. So there's a lot of concern from regulators sometimes about what can and shouldn't be done on the blockchain. Yeah. But in fact, it actually removes a lot of those secrets that he mentioned about the fiat world, and it actually creates opportunity for a seamless and integrated world, but also for regulatory compliance.
Yeah, it's great. MoneyGram having so much expertise in that world should be really transferable.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned a pilot, and I'd love to ask you about the status of that. So when the agreement was signed, you said that the pilot would go live in 2021. So do you have a status update?
I do have a status update on that, and I'll just say that there's really been two key aspects to bringing that to life. So first has been really working with Stellar and the wallets to ensure that we can create the interoperability for the customer. And we spent a lot of time today talking about the interaction with the consumer. There's a back end side of it as well, which is sort of all the conversion of USDC and then back into fiat, and we're doing that with our partner Circle. So that aspect has also come together, and it's actually going to enhance the speed of our settlement processes as well. And so we finally got those all in place. We've got all the agreements signed. We've got Elliptic doing the chain analysis. We've plugged everything together, and yeah, the pilot is, I'm proud to say, live and operable, and I think we've got a great video on that.
Awesome. Can't wait to see it.
Hello everyone, my name is Jake Urban and I'm a senior software engineer here at the SDF. Today I'm going to show you how to cash in and cash out the CF in 2022. Let's get started. As you can see, I'm at the home page of the Lobster mobile app, and I'm going to open up the sidebar menu and select Buy USDC. Lobster has now opened up a MoneyGram hosted deposit window, and I'm going to deposit